While I was asleep, my daughter came into my room every night. The same girl I considered my pride and joy, not a traitor. I set up a camera and saw something I could never have imagined. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. I found my reading glasses on the dresser again, not where I'd left them, on the nightstand next to the lamp, beside the water glass I drank from every night before bed, but on the dresser across the room, resting against the wooden jewelry box that had belonged to my late wife. The bookmark in my novel had migrated 3 pages forward from where I'd stopped reading. This was the 4th morning in 2 weeks. I carried the glasses downstairs, my fingers tight around the frames. The kitchen smelled like burnt toast and cheap coffee. My daughter Irene stood at the counter, scrolling through her phone, still in her bathrobe, even though her salon shift started in an hour. She didn't look up when I entered. "Someone was in my room again last night," I said. "My glasses were moved. The book—" "Dad, we've been through this." Her voice had edges I didn't recognize. "Nobody goes into your room." I set the glasses on the kitchen table between us. "Physical evidence. Then explain how they walked across the room by themselves." She finally looked at me, and there was something in her expression I couldn't name. Impatience, maybe. Or calculation. "Maybe you got up in the night and don't remember? You've been so tired lately." "I'd remember moving my own glasses." "That's exactly what worries me, Dad." She softened her tone, but it felt rehearsed. "That you don't remember." The back door opened, and my son-in-law Arthur walked in, bringing the humid Florida morning with him. He'd been out jogging, his gray t-shirt dark with sweat. He grabbed a bottle of water from the refrigerator and took a long drink, watching us over the rim. "Everything okay?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Rudolph thinks someone's been in his room," Irene said. "Not Dad thinks?" "Rudolph." When had that started? Arthur leaned against the counter, assuming the posture of a concerned family member. "Rudolph, I don't mean to worry you, but these memory lapses, they're concerning. My uncle had similar symptoms, and—" "I'm not having memory lapses." I kept my voice level, Professor calm. "I know where I put my things." They exchanged a glance. Quick, barely a second, but I caught it. That silent communication that excluded me completely. A shared understanding. My analytical mind, the one that had spent 30 years teaching law and ethics at the university, recognized the pattern. I'd lectured about gaslighting in my philosophy of justice course. The goal is to make the victim doubt their own perception of reality. I'd written those words on the whiteboard 100 times. The irony wasn't lost on me. "After everything we've done for you, we just want to help you too," Arthur said, and something in the way he emphasized everything made my jaw tighten. I thought of the check I'd written 18 months ago. $35,000. Irene had called me crying, said Arthur's real estate agency was going under, debts piling up, they were going to lose their apartment. Family helps family. That's what I'd believed. That's what I'd told myself when I invited them to move into my house a year ago. Get back on their feet. Save money. Temporary arrangement. They never paid me back. Never mentioned it again. I felt that strange heaviness creeping over me, the exhaustion that had been plaguing me lately. My thoughts moved through mud. I wanted to argue, to demand answers, but the words wouldn't arrange themselves properly in my mind. Irene was watching me, and for just a moment, I saw something flicker across her face. Not concern, satisfaction. "Dad?" She reached for my arm. "Are you feeling okay? You look pale." I pulled away. "I'm fine." "Maybe you should rest," Arthur suggested it. "We'll handle breakfast." I wanted to fight, wanted to stand my ground and force the truth out of them, but I recognized a losing battle when I saw one. Without proof, I was just a confused old man arguing with his caregivers. That's what they were turning me into. Strategic retreat, regroup, gather evidence. "Maybe you're right," I said, and walked out of the kitchen. Back in my bedroom, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the nightstand. The water glass sat there, half full from last night. I picked up my reading glasses, turned them over in my hands. Ordinary objects transformed into evidence of something I didn't yet understand. I thought of a young Irene, maybe 7 years old, running to me after her first day of 2nd grade. "You're the best dad ever," she'd announced, throwing her arms around my neck. When had that girl disappeared? When had this cold stranger replaced her? The photo on my dresser showed that little girl, gap-toothed and grinning. The frame was slightly crooked. I straightened it, my fingers lingering on the glass. If they were lying about small things, moved glasses, displaced bookmarks, what else were they lying about? And more importantly, why? I needed proof, and I knew exactly how to get it. 2 days later, my glasses were on the dresser again. I'd been meticulous the night before. Glasses on the nightstand, left side, next to the lamp. Bookmark on page 247 of the Grisham novel I was reading. Water glass filled exactly halfway, positioned 2 inches from the lamp base. I'd even taken a photo on my phone before turning off the light. Morning revealed the migration. Glasses by the jewelry box. Book open to page 251. Bookmark nowhere in sight. And the water glass, I studied it carefully, seemed lower than I remembered. Just slightly. Enough to notice if you were looking. I spent the day alone. Irene and Arthur both worked. Wouldn't be home until evening. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop, typed "small hidden cameras motion sensor" into the search bar. The results multiplied across the screen. Dozens of options, different sizes, different prices, different capabilities. I read reviews for an hour, learned about resolution and battery life and memory card storage, discovered that motion-activated cameras were common, affordable, legal to use in your own home. The paranoid had made them easy to buy. Around 2 in the afternoon, I drove to a Best Buy in Southgate, 20 minutes away. Far enough that I wouldn't run into anyone who knew me. I paid $89 cash for a camera the size of a thumb drive. The young clerk barely looked at me, just processed the transaction and handed me the bag. Back home, I locked my bedroom door and examined my purchase. The camera could record for 6 hours on motion activation. It had a memory card slot and a tiny lens that captured surprisingly clear footage, according to the box. I tested different positions. On the bookshelf, behind the lamp, tucked into the closet door frame. Nothing worked. The angles were wrong, or the camera was too visible, or the distance was too far. Then I looked at the photo frame on my dresser, the one with 8-year-old Irene grinning at me, her bicycle in the background, both of us covered in grass stains from her crash into my teaching her to ride. I'd picked her up, dusted her off. "The best dad ever," she'd said again, even with scraped knees. The frame was thick enough, deep enough. I removed the back, adjusted the contents, and positioned the camera behind the photo, angled toward the nightstand. From the front, you couldn't see it. The lens peeked through a tiny gap between the frame and the wall. Perfect view of the water glass, the lamp, the entire nightstand surface. I reassembled everything and waited. Dinner that evening was tense. Irene had picked up Chinese takeout on her way home. We ate at the kitchen table, chopsticks clicking against paper containers, nobody talking. Arthur scrolled through his phone. Irene studied her nails. I pushed lo mein around my plate and thought about evidence, documentation, proof. "Dad, I've been thinking," Irene said finally, "about what we talked about the other day. Have you made that appointment with Dr. Reynolds?" I looked up. "What appointment?" "To get checked out. Your memory. We're worried about you." Arthur set down his phone. "These things don't get better on their own, Rudolph. Catching problems early, that makes a difference." I remembered a case I'd consulted on 15 years ago, elder financial abuse. The victim had documented everything, bank statements, conversations, dates, and times. The defense attorney had argued it was all confusion, cognitive decline, misunderstanding. But documentation was everything. Without proof, it was just one person's word against another's. I'd told the prosecutor exactly that, and we'd won. "Maybe you're both right," I said slowly. "I'll think about it. Making an appointment." Irene's face brightened immediately. Too quickly. Relief flooded her features. "That's good, Dad. That's really good. We just want you to be healthy." "Of course," Arthur added. "We're family. We look out for each other." I nodded and returned to my noodles. Let them think I was capitulating. Let them believe their gaslighting was working. The rest of the evening crawled past. I read in the living room while they watched television, the laugh track grating against my nerves. Around 10, I announced I was going to bed. Arthur barely acknowledged me. Irene called out goodnight without looking away from the screen. In my room, I checked the camera. The red light blinked once. Armed and ready. Motion sensor active. Memory card inserted. I straightened the photo frame one last time, making sure the angle hadn't shifted. Then I looked at the water glass on my nightstand. Same glass I'd used for 20 years. Same routine every night. Fill it halfway, drink it before bed, refill it in the morning. A habit so ingrained I'd never questioned it. Tonight, I questioned it. I left the glass untouched and climbed into bed. The camera watched from its hiding place behind my daughter's gap-toothed smile. Somewhere in the house, Irene and Arthur were preparing for sleep, probably thinking I'd given up, probably confident their manipulation was succeeding. I closed my eyes but didn't sleep deeply. Part of me wanted to catch them in the act, wanted to wake up and confront them red-handed. But another part of me, the professor who'd taught criminal procedure for 3 decades, knew that patience produced better results than confrontation. Let the camera do its job. Let them think they were safe. Let them make mistakes. The darkness settled around me, and I thought about evidence, documentation, proof, the things that transformed suspicion into truth, that turned accusations into facts. Tomorrow morning, I'd know. One way or another, I'd finally know what they were doing in my room while I slept. 5 nights passed with nothing to show for them. The camera recorded hours of me sleeping, tossing occasionally, adjusting pillows. Normal bedroom activity. I'd check the footage each morning after Irene and Arthur left for work, fast-forwarding through the tedium of my own unconscious hours. Nothing. Yet each morning, small things remained wrong. My phone face down when I never placed it that way, the water glass positioned differently than I remembered. Tonight, I wouldn't sleep. Tonight, I'd catch whoever was entering my room. I lay in bed fully clothed beneath the blanket, positioned so I could see the door in the ambient light from the street. The digital clock on my nightstand read 10:47 p.m. Downstairs, I'd heard their bedroom door close 20 minutes ago. The house had settled into its nighttime quiet, the hum of the air conditioning, the occasional creak of cooling wood. I mentally reviewed case law from my teaching days. Commonwealth versus Berkowitz, State versus Morrison, anything to keep my mind active and alert. When that grew stale, I did multiplication tables. 12 times 17, 17 times 19. I pinched the inside of my wrist, the small pain sharpening my focus. Around 11:30, drowsiness touched me. Normal enough. I sat up, swung my legs out of bed, did 20 knee bends in the darkness. The movement helped. I returned to my vigil position, eyes on the door. Midnight came and went. Then, around the time I usually drifted off, something changed. The drowsiness didn't creep. It crashed over me like a physical wave. My eyelids turned to lead. My thoughts scattered and reformed sluggishly. I stood again, walked to the window, pressed my face against the cool glass. The cold helped for perhaps 30 seconds. Then that pharmaceutical weight dragged at every muscle, every nerve. I made it back to the bed, sat on the edge, tried to stand again, but my legs wouldn't cooperate properly. The last thing I remember was thinking this wasn't natural. This wasn't normal tiredness. Something was very wrong. I woke to sunlight pressing against my closed eyelids. My mouth tasted like rust and cotton. My head felt stuffed with wet sand. For several confused seconds, I couldn't remember where I was or what day it was. The disorientation was profound and terrifying. Slowly, reality assembled itself. My bedroom. Morning. I'd failed to stay awake. I looked at my nightstand. My phone was face down. I never left it that way. The water glass sat 3 inches closer to the lamp than where I'd positioned it. Even the sheet covering me seemed different, tucked more tightly around my shoulders than when I'd climbed into bed. My hands shook as I retrieved the camera's memory card. I took it to my desk, inserted it into my laptop, and waited for the files to load. The folder showed one video file, 6 hours and 42 minutes of recording. I opened it and began fast-forwarding, myself sleeping, shifting position at 11:19, rolling over at 12:03. Nothing else. Just a man in bed, unconscious, vulnerable. Then at 2:37 a.m., the door opened. I stopped the playback, dragged it back 10 seconds, pressed play at normal speed. The door swung inward slowly, carefully, making no sound. Hallway light spilled into the frame, creating a backlit silhouette. For one moment, I thought I wouldn't recognize who it was. Then she stepped forward enough that the camera caught her profile. My daughter Irene, wearing her blue bathrobe. She moved to my bedside with practiced silence, her movements efficient and rehearsed. Her right hand reached into her robe pocket and produced a small bottle, prescription-sized, amber-colored. She unscrewed the cap, tilted it over the water glass on my nightstand. 3 drops fell. 4. 5. She recapped the bottle, returned it to her pocket, then took something from her left pocket, a small spoon. She stirred the water in tiny circles, the spoon barely clinking against the glass. 38 seconds from door opening to door closing. She was gone. I sat frozen, staring at the paused screen. Her face was partially visible in one frame, calm, focused, showing no more emotion than someone preparing coffee. This wasn't improvised. This wasn't a single desperate act. This was routine. I restarted the video, watched it again, then a third time, taking notes. Timestamp, duration, her movements, the bottle's size and color, the methodical stirring to ensure dissolution. Footsteps sounded on the stairs, voices in the kitchen below, Irene and Arthur starting their morning routines. The smell of coffee drifted up through the heating vents. I had to go down there, had to sit across from them, had to eat breakfast and act as though I'd seen nothing, knew nothing, suspected nothing. I saved 3 copies of the video to different folders, then removed the memory card and hid it in my desk drawer beneath old tax returns. Stood, tested my legs, still shaky but functional, looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, pale, exhausted, frightened, but I couldn't show any of that. In the kitchen, Irene stood at the stove scrambling eggs. Arthur sat at the table scrolling through his phone, coffee mug steaming beside him. They both looked up when I entered. "Morning," I said, forcing my voice into groggy normalcy. "I slept hard last night. Barely remember my head hitting the pillow." "That's good, Dad." Irene smiled at me, warm and genuine. "You needed the rest. You've seemed so tired lately." Arthur nodded. "See? All that worry about sleep problems. Sometimes you just need to relax." I poured coffee, my back to them so they wouldn't see my expression. My daughter had just poisoned me, was still poisoning me, had been poisoning me for how long? Weeks? Months? And now she stood there flipping eggs, asking if I wanted toast, acting like someone's caring daughter instead of what? What was she? "Dad, you look a little pale," Irene said. "Are you feeling all right?" "Just waking up slowly." I turned, managed something resembling a smile. "The coffee will help." "Maybe you should take it easy today. Stay home. Rest." "Might meet Tom for coffee later," I said, inventing a cover story as I spoke. "Haven't seen him in months." "That's nice," Irene said. "You should get out more." Arthur barely looked up. "What time are you meeting him?" "Late morning. Nothing definite." The conversation continued. Mundane, normal, poisonous. I ate scrambled eggs that tasted like cardboard, drank coffee that did nothing for the fog in my head, watched them exchange glances when they thought I wasn't looking. Small, satisfied smile that made my stomach twist. After they left for work, Irene to her salon, Arthur to the car dealership, I returned to my bedroom and looked at the water glass from this morning. I hadn't drunk from it yet. The water sat there, clear and innocent-looking, containing whatever substance my daughter had added in the dark hours of early morning. I needed to know exactly what she was giving me, and then I needed to figure out why. The lab would give me answers. What I did with those answers, that decision could wait another 48 hours. I found a small plastic bottle in the recycling bin, washed it 3 times with hot water and dish soap, dried it carefully with a clean towel. In the bathroom, with the door locked, I poured the water from my nightstand glass into the bottle, sealed it tight, wrapped it in a plastic grocery bag, and tucked it into my jacket pocket. When I came downstairs, Irene was making lunch. "You're dressed nice," she said. "Still meeting Tom?" "In about an hour." I'd showered, put on slacks and a button-down shirt, the kind of effort that suggested a genuine social engagement. "Probably be gone most of the afternoon." "That's wonderful, Dad. Don't rush back. Enjoy yourself." Arthur barely glanced up from the television. The casual dismissal stung less than it should have. His indifference was useful now. I drove east toward Tampa, taking I-275 across the bay. The water sample sat in my jacket pocket like evidence in a trial, which I supposed it was, just premature. The prosecutor building his case before the defense even knew they'd been caught. Tampa Bay Medical Labs occupied the ground floor of a medical plaza off Dale Mabry Highway, 35 minutes from my house. I'd chosen this location deliberately, far enough that nobody would recognize me, professional enough to provide courtroom-worthy documentation. The waiting room smelled like antiseptic and recycled air. I approached the reception desk where a young woman with efficient movements and tired eyes looked up from her computer. "I need a water sample analyzed," I said. She slid a form across the counter. "What type of analysis? Bacterial contamination? Heavy metals? Chemical? Pharmaceutical compounds. Sedatives specifically, possibly antipsychotics." Her expression shifted slightly, recognition crossing her features. She'd seen this before. "I'll have you speak with our lead technician." She disappeared through a door, returned a moment later with a woman in her 40s, wearing a white lab coat, dark hair pulled back severely. "I'm Dr. Chen, the lab supervisor," she said, extending her hand. "You need pharmaceutical testing on a water sample?" I shook her hand. "I have reason to believe someone in my household is contaminating my drinking water. I need documentation of what's being added." She studied my face for a moment, taking in my age, my clothing, my demeanor. Whatever she saw satisfied some internal assessment. "Are you in immediate danger? I can provide resources for emergency services if—" "I appreciate that. I'm taking precautions. I need the evidence first." She nodded once, crisply. "We can run a comprehensive pharmaceutical panel, tests for benzodiazepines, barbiturates, antipsychotics, antidepressants, and common sedatives. Standard testing takes 5 to 7 days. Urgent processing is 48 hours. "Urgent processing? How much?" $380. I counted out $400 bills from my wallet, cash I'd withdrawn the previous week, telling Irene I was paying a handyman. Dr. Chen wrote a receipt, labeled my sample with a case number, and had me sign chain of custody documentation. "We'll call you when results are ready," she said. "Do you want them mailed, or will you pick them up?" "I'll pick them up." Driving home, I felt the strange duality of purposeful action masking profound fear. I was being poisoned by my daughter. Each night I went to sleep, I was made unconscious by substances she administered, and until I understood the full scope of her plan, I had to continue drinking that water, continue that nighttime ritual, continue being her victim while I gathered enough evidence to become her prosecutor. The next 2 days were performance art. I drank from the water glass each night, felt the unnatural drowsiness claim me, woke heavy-headed and disoriented. The camera captured Irene's visits, 2:41 a.m. the first night, 2:34 a.m. the second. Same routine, same efficiency, same casual poisoning of her father. During the days, I maintained my role, slightly confused, increasingly drowsy. Arthur commented on it at dinner. "You seem more settled lately, more peaceful." Peaceful? When he meant sedated, managed, controlled, I forced a smile. "Just trying to relax more. Everyone keeps telling me I worry too much." Irene patted my hand. "That's good, Dad. Worrying doesn't help anything." 48 hours after submitting the sample, I drove back to Tampa Bay Medical Labs. Dr. Chen met me in the lobby, handed me a manila envelope with clinical detachment, though her eyes held something else. Concern, perhaps, or recognition of what this envelope represented. "Thank you," I said. "Be careful," she replied, which wasn't standard laboratory protocol. In my car, parked in the medical plaza lot, I opened the envelope. The report was 3 pages of technical analysis, charts, and medical terminology. But the summary was clear enough. Zolpidem, Ambien, 15 mg concentration, sedative hypnotic quetiapine, Seroquel. Trace amounts, antipsychotic, commonly prescribed for sleep disorders, also causes cognitive dulling at low doses. 15 milligrams of Ambien, enough to knock out someone my size for 8 hours, and quetiapine, not prescribed for sleep in someone healthy, prescribed for serious mental conditions, but in small doses mixed with a sedative, it created something else: confusion, memory issues, difficulty concentrating, symptoms that mimicked early-stage dementia. I read the report 3 times before the full scope crystallized. They weren't trying to kill me. at least not quickly. They were trying to make me incompetent, make me seem like someone who couldn't manage his own affairs, make his own decisions, control his own life or finances. My house was worth $600,000, maybe more in the current market. My retirement accounts held another $200,000, Social Security and pension income of $4,000 monthly. And if they could establish I was mentally declining, if they could get guardianship, everything would become theirs to manage, theirs to spend, theirs to control. That night, after Irene and Arthur had gone to bed, I sat at my desk and began creating backups. Uploaded the video footage to encrypted cloud storage, using a VPN connection to mask my activity. Burned 2 DVDs of the footage, labeled them Home Videos 2024 in innocuous handwriting. Scanned the lab report, printed multiple copies. Placed originals in my safety deposit box at the bank during a trip the following morning. Told Irene I was meeting Tom again. Then I called my sister Margaret in Orlando. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Rudolph, is everything okay? You never called during the week." "I'm sending you a package," I said. "Flash drive and some documents. Don't open it. Don't look at it. Just keep it somewhere safe." Silence on the line. Then, "You're scaring me. What's going on?" "I'm handling something. If anything happens to me, anything at all, take that package to the police." "Anything happens? Rudolph?" "Promise me, Margaret." Her voice went quiet. "I promise. But you need to tell me what's happening. Does this have something to do with Irene and Arthur? If I'm wrong, I'll explain later and we'll laugh about my paranoia. If I'm right, you'll understand when you open it." I shipped the package overnight from a FedEx store, got tracking confirmation, watched the status updates until it showed delivered to her apartment. Evidence secured. Chain of custody established. Backups created. Timeline documented. But I didn't have everything yet. I knew what and how. I still needed why spelled out in their own words, their own planning, their own incrimination. I needed them comfortable enough to discuss their full scheme where I could record it. Late that night, evidence secured in multiple locations. Sister notified, protection established. I sat at my desk and thought about justice. Not revenge, justice. The kind that required airtight cases and incontrovertible proof and witnesses who couldn't be dismissed or discredited. They thought I was fading away. Thought their plan was working perfectly. Thought they were winning. Let them keep thinking that. Let them get comfortable enough to talk freely. Let them reveal the full scope of what they'd planned for me. I closed my laptop, locked my desk drawer. Tomorrow I'd continue the performance, drinking the poison water, exhibiting the drugged confusion, playing the role of declining father. But I wasn't the target anymore. I was the hunter. 10 days of performance passed. I called Irene by the wrong name twice. Asked what day it was 6 times in one afternoon. Stood in the kitchen appearing confused about where we kept the coffee mugs I'd stored in the same cabinet for 20 years. Each mistake earned satisfied glances between them, small smiles they tried to hide. They thought they were winning. That Tuesday evening after dinner, I announced I was exhausted and heading to bed early. 8:30 was absurdly early, but I made a show of being unsteady, gripping the back of my chair for support. "Are you feeling all right, Dad?" Irene's concern sounded almost genuine. "Just tired. So tired lately." I shuffled toward the stairs. In my bedroom, I waited 20 minutes until I heard them moving to the kitchen. Then I opened my door silently, positioned myself in the darkened hallway, where their voices carried clearly. I took out my phone, opened the voice recorder, pressed record, and listened. "Much longer," Irene was saying. "He's declining fast. Another month, maybe 2, and we can file the paperwork." Arthur's voice held confidence I'd never heard before. "The way he's going, any doctor will confirm he's incompetent." Silence. Then Irene, quieter. "But he's my father. This feels... Your father is sitting on over $500,000 in assets while we're drowning in debt." Arthur's frustration broke through. "The house alone is worth $520,000. His retirement accounts, his savings, it's all just sitting there. You promised this was safe, that nobody would know. Nobody will know. I researched this carefully. Zolpidem and quetiapine in these doses create perfect symptoms: confusion, memory loss, disorientation. Doctors will think it's early-stage dementia. These drugs don't show up on standard blood work. By the time anyone thinks to look deeper, we'll already have guardianship. My fingers tightened around the phone. He'd researched it, planned every detail. What if he's written us out of the will? Irene asked. Doesn't matter. With guardianship, we control everything while he's alive. And he's named you as heir anyway. I checked the documents in his office last month. You went through his papers? How else do we plan this properly? He has no other children. Margaret is just a sister. She gets nothing. This is our future, Irene. Our only way out of this debt. A long pause. When Irene spoke again, her voice was smaller. Sometimes I think about before. When Dad used to help me with homework, or when he walked me down the aisle. This would destroy him if he knew. He won't know. That's the point. Arthur's coldness was absolute. And what's he going to do with all that money anyway? Die and leave it to some charity? We need it now. We earned it, dealing with him all these months. Another pause. Then, I suppose you're right. We don't have another option. We schedule him for that doctor's appointment in 2 weeks, get the medical documentation, then we file. Another month after that, and everything is ours. I stopped the recording. 8 minutes and 43 seconds. Every word documented, every admission captured. Back in my room, I sat in darkness and let the full scope settle over me. Not just theft, complete destruction. They wanted to take my home, my money, my independence, my dignity, everything that remained of the life I'd built with my wife, everything I'd planned to leave as a legacy. The $35,000 I'd given them hadn't helped. It had shown them I had resources worth taking. Sleep didn't come that night, not because of the drugs, I hadn't drunk the water, because I sat transcribing key quotes from the recording, timestamping the most damaging statements, adding them to my evidence file, building a prosecution. Morning came. I went downstairs and performed my role. Asked Irene when she was coming to visit. She lived there. She exchanged that glance with Arthur, satisfaction mixed with something that might have been guilt, quickly suppressed. Going to the library for a few hours, I announced after breakfast. Haven't been out much lately. That's nice, Dad. Don't overdo it. I drove downtown to Daniel Prescott's law office, a small practice on Main Street, specializing in elder law and criminal defense. Prescott was in his mid-50s, gray at the temples with the bearing of someone who'd seen enough courtrooms to respect them. I'd called ahead. He was expecting me. Mr. Collins, he said, shaking my hand, you mentioned elder abuse on the phone. Tell me what's happening. I presented everything. Video files on a USB drive, 5 instances of my daughter entering my room at night, adding substances to my water, laboratory report documenting zolpidem and quetiapine in that water, medical report showing those same drugs in my system, audio recording from last night's kitchen conversation, timeline of symptoms, incidents, dates, detective notes I'd been keeping. Prescott watched the videos in silence, read the reports carefully, listened to the audio with his eyes closed, concentrating. When he looked up, his expression was grim. Mr. Collins, what they're doing is attempted serious bodily injury at minimum, possibly attempted murder under Florida law. The premeditation is clear. You have an exceptionally strong criminal case. I don't want them to just stop. The words came out harder than I intended. I want them to face full consequences. Prison, criminal record, public exposure. They need to pay for this. Then we do this methodically. Prescott leaned forward. We gather more evidence. Let them commit further acts. When they file for guardianship, and they will, we counter with everything. The court will be forced to involve law enforcement. They'll be arrested in the courthouse. How long will this take? 4 to 6 weeks if we're strategic, but the case will be airtight. They won't be able to defend themselves. What do I need to do? Continue the performance. Let them think they're succeeding. We'll change your will immediately. Cut them out completely. Get additional medical documentation. Install a second camera for redundancy. Build such an overwhelming case that no prosecutor can decline it. No defense can challenge it. I paid his retainer $350 in cash. Shook his hand. Left with a plan. In my car, parked in the structure behind his building, I sat holding his business card and a receipt. 4 to 6 weeks of continuing to be poisoned. 4 to 6 weeks of acting confused while staying sharp. 4 to 6 weeks of watching my daughter destroy me while I documented her destruction. They wanted to take everything from me. They'd learn what it meant to truly lose everything. But first, I needed them to commit fully. Let them think they were winning right up until the moment they discovered they'd lost. I started the car. The drive home felt different. I wasn't the victim in my own house anymore. I was the prosecutor, waiting for the defendants to seal their fate. The next afternoon, I sat in the office of Linda Harrison, a notary public whose name Prescott had provided. She reviewed the new will I'd drafted with Prescott's guidance. "Mr. Collins, I need to verify. You're of sound mind and making these changes voluntarily?" "Completely sound mind. Completely voluntary." I kept my voice steady. "My daughter and her husband are living in my home. I have specific reasons for this change." "And you want to leave your daughter exactly $1? "Exactly $1, with the notation, for reasons she understands personally. That language is crucial." She studied my face, then nodded. "The dollar prevents her from claiming she was forgotten. I've seen cases like this before." I signed. 2 witnesses from her office signed. She applied her seal. My sister Margaret became the primary beneficiary of everything: the house, retirement accounts, all assets. Irene would receive $1 and the knowledge that I knew. 3 copies, one with Prescott, one in my safety deposit box at First National, one mailed to Margaret with instructions to open only if something happened to me. The first strike was complete. They just didn't know it yet. 3 days later, I drove to Tampa General Hospital for an appointment with Dr. Sarah Chen, a toxicologist Prescott recommended. She was in her mid-40s, efficient movements, compassionate eyes that had seen suffering before. I showed her the laboratory report on the water, explained the situation without embellishment. She took blood samples, clipped hair from the back of my head. Hair retained drug traces for months. "Results in 5 to 7 days, she said. "But Mr. Collins, are you safe at home?" "I'm taking precautions. I need the documentation more than intervention right now." Her expression shifted to understanding. "I'll document everything. But please be careful. What they're doing isn't just theft. It's assault." 5 days later, her report arrived. Both zolpidem and quetiapine present in my system in concentrations consistent with regular dosing over weeks. Her official statement: drug presence and concentration patterns consistent with external administration, not prescribed usage. Forensic proof. That same week, I hired James Mitchell, a private investigator Prescott had worked with before. Mitchell was in his mid-50s, graying hair, seen-it-all expression. His office was a converted house in a commercial district, files stacked on every surface. "Elder financial abuse," he said when I explained. "I've worked a dozen cases. Your evidence is already strong. What do you need from me?" "Their financial situation, their communications, their planning, everything that shows motive and premeditation." "Give me 10 days and $1,200. I paid half up front. 10 days later, he delivered a 40-page report. Official debts, $87,000. Arthur's hidden gambling, online poker accounts showing $23,000 in losses over the past year. Irene confiding to coworkers at Bella's salon about inheriting property soon and finally getting financial security. Arthur's browser history from public Wi-Fi showing searches for Florida guardianship laws and how to prove incompetency. "They've been planning this for months," Mitchell said. "Maybe longer. Your son-in-law has a serious problem. The gambling losses alone. The $35,000 I gave them probably went straight to his poker accounts." "Probably." Mitchell closed the folder. "You're building a prosecution-level case. This isn't just evidence. This is a narrative." That night, after Irene completed her routine, entering my room at 2:40 a.m., adding drops to my water, stirring carefully, I installed a second camera. This one went inside a decorative bookend on my shelf, different angle, overlooking the bed from another direction. Redundancy. If they discovered one camera, the other survived. Over the next week, I captured 3 more instances. Total now, 5 separate video recordings spanning different dates. Pattern, premeditation, incontrovertible proof. Every night, I drank the drugged water. Every morning, I woke heavy-headed and genuinely tired. Dr. Chen's warnings echoed: liver damage, cognitive effects, dependency risks. The performance was taking a real toll, but I continued. At dinner one evening, I made my confusion more pronounced. "Irene, when is your mother coming home? I thought she was just at the store." She glanced at Arthur before responding, voice gentle. "Dad, Mom passed away years ago, remember?" I let genuine confusion cross my face. "Oh, yes, I forgot for a moment. Sorry." Arthur barely concealed his satisfaction. "It's okay, Rudolph. These things happen. Maybe you should rest after dinner." I nodded slowly. "Yes, I am tired. Very tired." They think I'm gone, I thought, leaving the table. They think they've already won. In 3 weeks, they'd learn what it means to lose everything. Throughout this period, I met regularly with Prescott. Each time, I brought new evidence, another video file, the detective's report, medical documentation, photographs of Arthur's laptop screen showing his research. We now have video evidence of 5 separate poisoning instances, Prescott summarized during our 4th meeting. Laboratory analysis of the water. Medical tests proving those drugs are in your system from external sources. Private investigator report documenting motive and desperation. Audio recording of them discussing the plan. "This is overwhelming." When do we strike? When they file for guardianship. Let them commit fully. They'll hire an attorney. Submit documentation. File court papers. The moment those papers are filed, we counter with everything. The court will have no choice but to involve law enforcement. How much longer? Based on their timeline, 2 to 3 weeks. Can you maintain the performance? I've maintained it this long. I can last another month if needed. Good, because when we move decisively. They won't see it coming until it's already over. By early May, everything was ready. Multiple copies of all evidence, backed up in cloud storage, secured in my safety deposit box, sent to Margaret. Medical proof, financial motive, video documentation, audio admission, detective findings, an overwhelming prosecution-ready case. Late one night, sitting at my desk after another drugged sleep, I reviewed the master timeline I'd created. Every incident documented, every piece of evidence cataloged, every witness identified. For 30 years, I taught ethics, taught that justice requires evidence, patience, perfect execution. Now I demonstrated. They were about to learn that the man they thought they'd destroyed was about to destroy them instead. Over the next week, I escalated my performance to levels that should have alarmed any genuine caregiver. On Tuesday, I walked 6 blocks to a coffee shop I'd never visited, sat there for an hour, then called Irene. "I'm not sure where I am. I went for a walk and I don't recognize this area." She arrived within 20 minutes, brought me home with her arm around my shoulders. Mrs. Patterson, our neighbor, watched from her driveway. Irene made sure she saw us. "Dad's been having more episodes like this," she told her loud enough for me to hear. Inside, Arthur waited. How lost was he? 6 blocks away, completely disoriented. Irene glanced at me with what might have been concern or calculation. "We need to move faster. He's ready." Thursday morning, I asked Irene 3 times what year it was. Called her Susan twice, my wife's name. Left the stove on after making coffee, stood in the kitchen appearing confused, until Arthur turned it off with exaggerated patience. Friday afternoon, Irene scheduled an emergency appointment with Dr. Reynolds, my family physician for the past decade. In his office, I gave my best performance yet. "Mr. Collins, can you tell me what brought you in today?" Dr. Reynolds asked, his weathered face creased with professional concern. I looked around the examination room as though seeing it for the first time. My daughter brought me. I'm not sure why." Irene stepped forward. "Doctor, I'm really worried. Over the past few weeks, Dad's decline has accelerated. He gets lost in the neighborhood, forgets my name, asks the same questions repeatedly. Yesterday, he asked when my mother was coming home. She passed away 8 years ago. Do you remember your wife passing away, Rudolph?" I paused, let my face struggle with the memory. "Yes, I think so. It's fuzzy sometimes." Reynolds conducted a basic cognitive assessment. When he asked me to remember 3 words, I deliberately forgot 2. When asked what year it was, I said 2023. When asked who the president was, I hesitated and guessed wrong. He wrote extensively in my chart, turned to Irene. "I'm noting significant cognitive concerns. Has he had any falls?" "Not yet. but I'm terrified he will. He shouldn't be living alone, but he insists he's fine. I don't know what to do. Reynolds prescribed neurological testing I would never attend. His documentation would be perfect for their guardianship petition. Perfect for my counter-evidence showing how they'd manipulated medical professionals. That afternoon, Arthur met with Gary Hendricks, an attorney whose office was above a dry cleaner on Tamiami Trail. I learned this later from Prescott's investigator. Hendricks charged $2,500 for basic guardianship cases, money Arthur borrowed from a payday loan at 25% interest. Your father-in-law is showing signs of dementia, Hendricks would have said, and you want guardianship to manage his affairs? Arthur would have nodded eagerly. He's not safe anymore. We've been living with him, keeping watch, but he needs legal structure, medical and financial decisions. Any opposition expected? Just his sister in Orlando, but she barely visits. We're the primary caregivers. It's well documented. I'll draft the petition. We'll file next week. While Arthur made his arrangements, I drove to Prescott's office. We filed our own petition that same day. Emergency motion for protective order and criminal investigation. It included summaries of all evidence, videos, lab reports, medical documentation, audio recording. We requested that when their guardianship petition was filed, both cases be heard together and law enforcement be notified. The filing was sealed. They'd have no warning. When they file their petition, the system will flag the related case, Prescott explained. The judge will review both before the hearing. They'll walk in thinking it's routine. They'll walk out facing criminal investigation. How long? Their attorney promised them a week. Hearing gets scheduled 7 to 10 days after filing. You're looking at 2 weeks total. 2 weeks. 14 more nights of drugged water. 14 more days of performance. I could manage that. At dinner that evening, I played my role. Arthur mentioned casually, Irene and I have been talking. Maybe it's time we looked into some help for you, Rudolph. Someone to manage things. I nodded vaguely. That might be good. I don't feel like myself lately. Inside, I was counting down. They thought they were managing me. They had no idea I was managing them. Every move, every filing, every piece of evidence leading to a trap they couldn't see. The following Wednesday, Prescott called. They filed this morning. Guardianship petition with medical documentation, witness statements, the works. Both cases have been assigned to Judge Rachel Morrison. Hearing scheduled for May 28th, 10 a.m. 8 days. I circled the date on my calendar in red ink. For 2 months, I'd been poisoned nightly, gaslit daily, systematically destroyed by my own daughter. In 8 days, that would end. In 8 days, justice would arrive. They filed their petition requesting control over my life. They were about to learn what it felt like to lose control over their own. I arrived at Sarasota County Courthouse at 9:30 on the morning of May 28th, wearing my best suit, charcoal gray, pressed sharp. The first time in months I'd looked fully professional, no shuffle in my step, no confusion in my eyes. Prescott walked beside me carrying a briefcase containing a laptop, printed evidence, and USB drives with backup copies of everything. In the lobby, I saw them. Irene wore a navy dress that made her look responsible and concerned. Arthur had managed a sport coat over khakis. Their attorney Hendricks stood with them, overweight, perpetually rushed, already sweating in the air-conditioned building. Mrs. Patterson, our neighbor, hovered nearby as their witness. When Irene saw me, her face registered confusion. "Dad? You have a lawyer?" I met her eyes steadily. "I do. You'll understand why shortly." Arthur stepped forward, suspicious now. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I've known what you were doing since late March. I've documented everything. The hearing will explain the rest." Before Irene could respond, Prescott gestured toward the elevator. "Save your questions for the courtroom, Ms. Collins. You'll have plenty to answer for shortly." At 9:50, Hendricks was called to meet with the judge's clerk. He returned 5 minutes later, looking puzzled. "There's another petition filed in this case, something sealed. The judge wants to hear both matters together." Arthur's confident expression flickered. "Another petition? Who filed it?" Hendricks glanced at Rudolph. "The file's sealed. We'll find out in the hearing." Across the hallway, I watched them process this information, watched doubt creep into their certainty. At 10 a.m., we entered courtroom 4B. Judge Rachel Morrison sat behind the bench, late 50s, steel gray hair, the bearing of someone who'd heard every excuse and believed none of them. Her courtroom was modern, sparse, designed for efficiency rather than drama. "We're here on the matter of guardianship petition for Rudolph Collins," she began. "Mr. Hendricks, present your case." Hendricks stood, fumbling slightly with his notes. "Your Honor, we're seeking guardianship based on Mr. Collins's cognitive decline and inability to care for himself. His daughter and son-in-law, who reside with him, have documented his deteriorating condition. He submitted Dr. Reynolds's chart notes showing cognitive impairment, called Mrs. Patterson, who testified she'd seen me lost and confused in the neighborhood, presented Irene's written statement about my daily struggles, the forgotten names, the repeated questions, the confusion about my late wife." Arthur looked satisfied. Irene glanced at me nervously. Judge Morrison reviewed the documents and then turned to Prescott. "Counsel, you filed a related motion?" "Yes, Your Honor, an emergency motion for protective order. We have evidence that Mr. Collins' alleged cognitive decline is not natural, but the result of systematic poisoning by the petitioners themselves." The courtroom went silent. Arthur's face drained of color. Irene gasped softly. Hendricks half stood. "Your Honor, that's absurd." "I'll hear the evidence," Morrison said sharply. "Proceed, Mr. Prescott." Prescott opened his laptop, connected it to the courtroom screen. "What you're about to see are 5 separate instances recorded over 2 months of Ms. Collins entering her father's bedroom at night and adding substances to his drinking water." The video began. The courtroom screen showed my dark bedroom, timestamp visible in the corner. March 24th, 2:37 a.m. The door opened slowly. Irene's silhouette appeared, backlit by hallway light. She moved to my bedside, removed a small bottle from her robe pocket, added drops to my water glass, stirred with a small spoon, left. 38 seconds. Crystal clear. Undeniable. Prescott played 3 more instances, different dates, identical pattern. Each time Irene's face was partially visible. Each time the action was methodical, practiced, deliberate. Behind me I heard Mrs. Patterson inhale sharply. "The laboratory analysis of that water," Prescott continued, "revealed zolpidem, commonly known as Ambien, and quetiapine, an antipsychotic. These drugs cause the exact symptoms Ms. Collins has been reporting to doctors." He presented the lab report, then Dr. Chen's medical documentation showing those same drugs in my system from external administration. Then the detective's report on their financial desperation, $87,000 in debt, Arthur's gambling losses. Finally, the audio recording. Arthur's voice filled the courtroom. "Another month or 2 and we can file for guardianship. He's declining perfectly." Irene's voice quieter. "But he's my father. Your father is sitting on over $500,000 in assets. These drugs create symptoms doctors will think are dementia. We'll have control, we'll clear our debts, and he'll never know what happened." Judge Morrison's jaw tightened as the recording played. When it ended, she addressed them directly. "Ms. Collins, Mr. Martinez, is that you in the video and on the recording?" Irene's voice was barely audible. "Yes, but it wasn't supposed to hurt him. It was just to help him sleep." "Shut up," Arthur hissed at her. Morrison's expression hardened. "Based on this evidence, I am denying the guardianship petition. Mr. Collins is clearly of sound mind and has been the victim of a calculated scheme." She looked at the bailiff. "Contact the sheriff's office. I'm referring this matter immediately for criminal investigation." Arthur stood agitated. "This is insane. We were helping—" "Sit down, Mr. Martinez." Morrison's voice could have cut steel. "I'm issuing an emergency protective order. You are to have no contact with Mr. Collins. You are not to return to his residence. Sheriff's deputies will escort you to collect your belongings under supervision within 48 hours. Irene was crying now, silently, her body shaking. "Court is adjourned," Morrison said. "Mr. Collins, the protective order is effective immediately. Mr. Prescott will provide you with certified copies." In the hallway afterward, Arthur turned on Irene immediately. "I told you to be more careful. I told you—" "You planned this," she shot back through tears. "This was your idea." 2 sheriff's deputies arrived, spoke with Prescott, then approached Arthur and Irene. "We need to ask you some questions about the evidence presented in court. You're not under arrest at this time, but you may want to contact an attorney." Hendricks stepped between them. They're not answering questions without counsel. I don't handle criminal cases. You need to find a criminal defense attorney immediately. Prescott touched my arm. Let's go. On the courthouse steps, spring sunlight felt different than it had 2 hours earlier. Prescott asked, "How do you feel?" I looked back at the building. Inside, my daughter and her husband were being questioned by deputies about poisoning me for months, like justice just started. The state attorney will file charges within a week. They'll offer a plea deal or go to trial. Either way, they're facing years in prison. I nodded. She made her choice. Arthur made his. Now they'd live with the consequences. The hard part was over. Now came the restoration. 2 weeks after the courthouse hearing, the state attorney's office filed formal charges. Attempted aggravated battery, second-degree felony under Florida law. Maximum penalty, 15 years in prison. Irene and Arthur were arrested at their temporary apartment on a Wednesday morning. Booked, fingerprinted, photographed. The mugshots became public record within hours. Released on $25,000 bond each, they borrowed $5,000 from Arthur's brother at 15% interest to pay the bondsman. By Thursday, the Sarasota Herald-Tribune ran the story. Local couple charged with poisoning elderly father for inheritance. Front page, with their photos. The article detailed everything, the video evidence, the drugs, the guardianship scheme, my testimony. The story went viral, shared thousands of times. Comments sections filled with outrage. Arthur's car dealership fired him Friday. "Customer complaints," the manager said. "We can't have this association." Irene's salon called her that same afternoon. "Don't come in Monday, or ever." I learned all this from Prescott, who tracked their unraveling with professional detachment. I didn't seek the information, but I needed to know they couldn't threaten me again. By late June, their financial collapse accelerated. Credit card companies sued. Arthur's gambling debts, apparently larger than the detective's report showed, came due from online poker sites and some less savory lenders who called at all hours. Prescott filed my civil lawsuit, $200,000 for intentional infliction of emotional distress and elder abuse. Unable to fight multiple legal battles, they filed bankruptcy. A trustee sold Arthur's car for $22,000, Irene's jewelry for $3,000. After secured creditors took their share, almost nothing remained. My civil judgment would survive the bankruptcy, following them for 20 years. The protective order's deadline arrived July 1st. Sheriff's deputies supervised their eviction from my house. I stood on the sidewalk with Prescott, watching them load a rental truck with their belongings. Irene's hands shook as she carried boxes. Arthur avoided looking at me entirely. When they finished, a deputy collected their keys. I entered my home, truly mine again, and immediately had the locks changed. Security system installed. Then I spent days cleaning, removing every trace of their presence, repainting, replacing furniture, reclaiming. They moved to a 2-bedroom apartment in a rough neighborhood, $950 a month, all they could afford with Arthur's brother's dwindling loan. Irene found work as a cashier at a discount grocery store, minimum wage, no background check. Arthur, too proud initially, burned through their borrowed money before taking night shift warehouse work at $14 an hour. Combined income, maybe $3,200 monthly. They were surviving, not living. Their marriage deteriorated visibly. Through Prescott's investigator, I needed to ensure they weren't violating the protective order. I learned about the constant arguments, Arthur drinking heavily, Irene sinking into depression. Neighbors complained about their fighting. "This is your fault," Arthur would shout, according to reports. "You got caught on camera." "Your plan," Irene would respond. "Your drugs. You pressured me every day." Their criminal defense attorney, Rebecca Torres, cost $15,000 they didn't have. Borrowed again, this time at 20% interest. Torres reviewed the evidence against them and delivered brutal truth. 5 videos, lab reports, medical documentation, audio confession. "The state attorney has offered a plea," Torres told them in early August. According to her later court filings, plead guilty to 3rd-degree felony, accept probation instead of prison. The alternative is trial, conviction, and years of incarceration. Arthur wanted to fight. Irene, more realistic after seeing herself on video, poisoning her father, knew they had no defense. After days of argument, they agreed. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for August 27th. I spent those weeks rebuilding. Margaret visited twice. My neighbors, understanding now what had happened, treated me with new respect. Former colleagues from the college called offering support. I started writing my victim impact statement, revising it multiple times until the words captured everything without becoming vindictive. Prescott reviewed it, suggested minor changes. The statement was ready. Late August, 3 days before the hearing, I sat in my reclaimed dining room, the printed statement before me. Through the window I could see my garden, vegetables growing, flowers blooming. My house, my life, finally returned. The doorbell rang. Prescott, delivering final hearing details. "They're both planning to speak," he said. "Show remorse. Ask for mercy." I nodded. "They can ask. The judge will decide. Are you ready?" I looked at the statement, thought about 6 months of hell, the fear and betrayal and poisoning. I've been ready since I saw that first video. This ends next week. Then I can finally move forward. Prescott smiled slightly. "You're stronger than they ever understood." After he left, I sat alone in the silence of my home. No drugged water waiting, no daughter creeping in at night, no gaslighting over breakfast, just peace. And the certainty that justice, when properly prepared and patiently executed, eventually arrives. The criminal courthouse was larger than family court, more imposing. I arrived early on August 27th, with Prescott and Margaret, dressed in my best suit. Inside courtroom 2A, Judge Catherine Walsh presided. Late 50s, steel gray hair, the bearing of someone who'd seen every excuse. Irene and Arthur sat with Rebecca Torres at the defense table, both looking older than their years. Irene's eyes were red, her hands clasped tightly. Arthur stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. Judge Walsh reviewed the file. "The defendants have pleaded guilty to attempted aggravated battery, third-degree felony. Sentencing range is probation to 5 years prison." She looked at the assistant state attorney, Marcus Reed. "Does the state have a recommendation?" Reed stood. "Your Honor, the state recommends split sentencing. 2 years county jail, 3 years probation, community service, restitution, and permanent no-contact order. This was calculated elder abuse for financial gain." Torres argued for probation only. "Your Honor, my clients have already lost everything, jobs, home, reputation. They're not dangerous. Prison serves no purpose here." Judge Walsh turned to me. "Mr. Collins, would you like to address the court?" I walked to the podium. Didn't need my written statement. I'd memorized every word. "Your Honor, for 2 months I lived in fear that I was losing my mind. I'd wake confused, find things moved, struggle with basic tasks. When I asked my daughter about it, she told me I was imagining things, that I was getting old, that I needed help. She gaslit me while poisoning me every night. When I discovered the truth, saw the video of her adding drugs to my water, the betrayal was worse than the poisoning itself. This was my daughter, the child I'd raised, helped when she needed it, given $35,000 and opened my home to. She repaid my love with systematic abuse. They weren't just trying to steal money. They were trying to steal my competence, my independence, my autonomy. They wanted legal control over my life. If they'd succeeded, I'd be under guardianship now, unable to make my own decisions while they spent my savings and sold my home. They tried to erase me as a person. That's what was at stake, not just money, but my identity, my freedom, my existence as an independent human being. I'm not asking for vengeance. I'm asking for accountability." The courtroom was silent when I finished. I returned to my seat. Judge Walsh asked if the defendants wished to speak. Irene stood trembling. "Your Honor, There's no excuse for what I did. Every night I went into my father's room and poisoned him. I told myself it wasn't really hurting him, but I knew what we were planning. I knew we wanted him declared incompetent. I knew it was wrong. I did it anyway because I was desperate and weak. My father welcomed us into his home. He loved me, and I betrayed him in the worst way possible. I'm so deeply sorry. I think about it every day. I know I'll never forgive myself." She sat, crying. Arthur stood stiffly. "Your Honor, I take responsibility for my role. It was wrong. I regret it. I apologize to Mr. Collins." His words sounded hollow. He sat quickly. Judge Walsh took a long moment before speaking. Elder abuse is one of the most reprehensible crimes. You targeted a family member who trusted you, someone vulnerable. You administered drugs to make him appear incompetent so you could seize control of his assets. This wasn't weakness. It was months of calculated abuse. She paused. I sentence you each to 5 years probation. Conditions: 500 hours community service at elder care facilities. $500 monthly restitution for 10 years. Permanent no-contact order. Mandatory counseling. Random drug testing. Any violation results in immediate incarceration. You'll carry these felony convictions for life. These are the consequences of your choices. She banged the gavel. This court is adjourned. In the hallway, Torres approached with Irene. Arthur hung back. Mr. Collins, Torres said quietly, my client would like to speak with you if you're willing. Prescott started to object, but I raised my hand. I'll hear what she has to say. Irene stepped forward, mascara streaked, hands shaking. Dad, I know I have no right to call you that anymore. I just need you to know. I'm so sorry. I was weak and desperate, and I let Arthur convince me this was okay. But it wasn't. It was evil. I poisoned my own father. I tried to steal your life. I understand if you never forgive me. I don't forgive myself. She was genuinely crying, not performing. I looked at her, my daughter, and someone who'd committed terrible crimes against me. My response came measured, not cruel, but not comforting. Irene, apologies are words. I needed to hear them, but they don't undo what you did. You poisoned me for 2 months. You tried to take everything. The consequences you're facing are appropriate. Whether I forgive you someday, I don't know. That wound is deep. For now, I need distance. I need to heal without you in my life. Live with what you've done. Learn from it. Become someone better. But that's your journey, not mine. Mine is moving forward without you. I turned to Arthur, still standing back. And you don't even have the courage to apologize properly. I hope the next 10 years of payments remind you what greed costs. I walked away with Prescott and Margaret, didn't look back. Behind me, Irene was crying. Arthur stared at the floor. Outside, September sunshine felt different than it had 6 months ago. Margaret squeezed my hand. You did it. We did it, I corrected. I couldn't have done it alone. 3 weeks later, mid-September, I sat on my back patio with Margaret, glasses of wine catching the sunset. The garden was lush. The house glowed with warm light. In the distance, neighbors' laughter carried on the evening air. What's next? Margaret asked. I thought about my new routine, the seminars I now taught twice weekly at the community center. Protecting yourself from financial abuse. 20 seniors attended each session, taking notes, asking questions, thanking me afterward. My trauma transformed into purpose. Living, I said. Just living. That's enough. We clinked glasses. Rudolph Collins, 64 years old, survivor, teacher, brother, friend, was home. And home, finally, was safe. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.